All right, Boulder, we got to talk about it. The Shedeur conversation has been very, very polarizing right now in sports in general. Everybody's talking about it. Why Shedeur fell in the draft? Was there some sort of collusion or things like that? Well, it sounds like there wasn't really any collusion, but there was conversation that NFL owners said they don't want to deal with the Sanders family. I'm just telling you, an NFL legend mentioned this on the radio yesterday. I have a conspiracy theory as to why Shedeur fell to the Browns. So we're going to talk about both of those. I owe you that from the last video. And speaking of Colorado going forward, the Bucs have a really good chance of landing a portal wide receiver. So let's dive into all of that here on the Prime Time for College Football. Thank y'all for pulling up. I'm Jay, your host. Let's talk about this Shedeur Sanders situation because, of course, we all know that Shedeur is one of the more polarizing players out there. And mainly because, he's a Sanders. That's what happens when you are a Sanders. They're all known for being who they are and what they do. Now, for Shedeur, the big thing is he's considered to be entitled, arrogant, and all of that, which doesn't really fit a lot of the narratives and conversations I've heard. We posted a video on here about Chris Carter talking about, his story about Shedeur, which I thought was a fantastic story. He talked about how Shedeur was, very mature, very organized, and you could tell that he makes sure things are taken care of and he works his butt off. Same thing with Rap Sheet, Ian Rappaport. He talked about how his interactions with Shedeur were fantastic and there was no issues whatsoever. And even with some coaches that they've talked to and front office personnel, they didn't see any issues either. It's just depends on who it was. And it feels like Shedeur and Coach Prime rubbed some people the wrong way. Well, Boomer Esiason talked about this on WFAN Sports Radio. Let's hear what Boomer Esiason had to say.
They took him off, and they took him off because the owner said, take him off. I don't want that guy. Shedeur Sanders just torpedoed himself. His attitude off the field at the combine, his dad didn't help him either. He was on podcast talking about this is my son. If I can get him to where I want to get him to, I'm going to do that. But, when you listen to this kid talk right prior or at the combine about if you want a new culture in your locker room, I'm the guy to do that. I can turn it around. I mean, he's very high on himself. And I think he was very off-putting to many, many coaches and general managers in the league. And I'm telling you right now, and I know this after talking to 3 different personnel people in the NFL this weekend, they didn't even have him on their board. They took him off. And they took him off because the owner said, take him off. I don't want that guy. I don't want this entitled person on our team. And I don't blame him.
So that was NFL legend Boomer Esiason, former NFL quarterback. And to him, he thinks that Shedeur is also entitled, which is fascinating. But again, like I said, you saw from Ian Rappaport and others said the complete opposite. So many people have said opposite. So it's obvious that there is some truth in both. Some feel like he's too entitled and they don't like him. Others are like, no, we like the confidence as he has because that's what you need in order to be a good quarterback. Well, if teams took them off their board because of that, kind of silly in my personal opinion, but that is just the games that we play. And because of that, Shedeur is going to have to just go out there and prove himself. I said this in my last video. He's going to have to show himself to be legendary. If you do that, guess what? You're good. Nothing to even be concerned with because a legendary version of Shedeur Sanders is definitely what would be talked about if he goes out there and makes this happen. Now, I have a theory as to why the Cleveland Browns picked him up. Hop in the comments. Want to hear your thoughts on the Boomer Esiason piece. But this is my theory I have as to why Shedeur was drafted so late by the Cleveland Browns. And my thought process is a couple of things have happened. I heard Bomani Jones talk about this on his show, that he feels like Coach Prime and Shedeur overplayed their hand, as in they didn't really take the process seriously enough because they thought that they were a lock in the top 5. I see some truth in that. But I think the Cleveland Browns wanted to draft Shedeur. I don't know why they didn't get him in the third, but I think they drafted him and Dillon Gabriel together because the Deshaun Watson contract is stuck on there for 4 years. And I'm just going to say this. I don't think that Deshaun Watson will ever play for the Cleveland Browns again. I think he's done. His career is over in Cleveland. I think his career is over in NFL. The problem with that is that he got paid a lot of money by the Cleveland Browns, and he's not going to play. His cap hit's like $80 million coming up. So because of that, Cleveland has to do this in a smart financial way. They can't do it the way like they were doing before because they need to figure out money, which is a massive problem for them, which sucks. They can't afford this. They need to figure out their dollars and cents. And for them, their dollars and cents is they're going to have to go with cheap quarterbacks until Deshaun Watson falls off the books. 4 years. So Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel are now future projects for them. And to me, if Cleveland is smart, I mean, they got Kenny Pickett for cheap as well, but they need to extend all the way out 4 years. That's my theory behind it. I don't know how right I am, but that's what I'm thinking. Hop in the comments. I definitely want to hear your thoughts. Lastly, I want to talk about a player that I felt like the Buffs had a really good chance of landing, and it appears that I was 100% wrong. They landed him. Former five-star wide receiver Hakee Williams has committed to the Buffs just as I was recording this video. And I think it's a massive pickup. 6'2", 215. He's transferring in from Florida State. He had 21 catches for 267 yards and 2 touchdowns over 17 games for Florida State in his 2 years. He's got 3 years left to play. And I think he's a really big pickup. He was even on the Freaks list for like 247. Adam Mustiger has wrote a nice little article on him already. But this is a huge pickup to me for the Buffs because you just snatched up yourself another wide receiver to add to this room with Sincere Brown. This is to me how the Buffs are winning in the transfer portal. So this is a huge pickup of snagging a wide receiver of this caliber and growing that room. Want to hear from you all. Hop in the comments. Buffs do something big. What y'all think? All right. We'll talk more about the visits this coming weekend. The Buffs got some huge visits coming from IMG Academy on the recruiting trail. That could be game changers going forward. So we'll talk about that. We'll dive more into who those players are and what they do in another video later this week. And yeah, we'll keep up with the Shedeur stories as he's headed to Cleveland. And hopefully he shows up and shows out for the Browns. And like I said, he becomes legendary because of it. Let me know what y'all think. We want to hear from you all. We appreciate you pulling up. Hit the like and subscribe button. And as well as bell notifications so you don't miss the next set of videos. We will chop it up with all of you very soon.